You can't leave until I say you can." Vanessa Whitmore shouted it across Hawthorne Court at 7:14 on a Saturday morning, loud enough to stop 3 garage doors halfway open. The moving truck idled behind me, its diesel engine coughing into the cool fall air while strips of packing tape snapped against cardboard inside my empty house. Red and blue lights washed over the identical beige siding, the trimmed hedges, and the white Range Rover Vanessa had parked sideways across my driveway, like a suburban roadblock. She stood beside it in a cream blazer and sunglasses, one hand gripping her phone, the other pointing at me, as 2 patrol officers stepped onto the curb. "That man is removing HOA property," she said. "He owes us more than $21,000, and he's trying to disappear before we can collect." I could smell her perfume from 10 feet away, sharp and floral, mixing with exhaust and fresh-cut grass. Officer Daniels looked at the boxes stacked in the truck, then at the brass house numbers I had removed from beside my front door. "Sir, are those fixtures part of the property?" he asked. "They're mine," I said. "I installed them 6 years ago," Vanessa laughed. It was a dry little sound, practiced and cruel. Everything attached to a home in Hawthorne Ridge falls under association control. That was not true. Most of what Vanessa said before breakfast was not true, but she had learned that confidence could make nonsense sound official. She stepped closer, heels clicking against the pavement. "You thought you could sell your house, ignore the exit assessment, and sneak away before the board filed a lien." I kept my hands visible and my voice level. My father used to say that the loudest person in a property dispute was usually the one who had not read the deed. Inside my jacket pocket, my fingers touched a small brass key. It was cold, heavier than it looked, and cut for a door Vanessa believed only she could open. In the leather briefcase resting beside my moving boxes were 13 recorded deeds, each stamped by the county clerk 2 days earlier. 13 houses, 13 votes. Every one of them sitting on Vanessa's block. She thought I was leaving Hawthorne Ridge because she had beaten me. She thought the empty rooms behind me meant surrender. She had no idea I had spent the last 90 days buying the ground beneath her little kingdom. Officer Daniels asked Vanessa to move her SUV. She refused. Then she made the mistake that would follow her all the way into the hearing room. She looked directly at his body camera and said, "I froze his sale myself. I can create any assessment necessary to protect this community." The street went quiet except for the truck's engine and the faint hiss of sprinklers turning on down the block. I reached for the briefcase. Vanessa smiled because she thought I was finally going to pay her. Instead, I set it on the hood of her Range Rover and clicked open the brass latches. 6 years earlier, the house had smelled like fresh paint, cardboard, and the lemon cleaner the real estate agent used before every showing. Chloe was 12 then, all elbows, sneakers, and questions, racing from room to room while the afternoon sun cut bright rectangles across the hardwood floor. She stopped in the smallest bedroom at the back of the house, pressed both hands to the window, and stared at the red maple growing near the end of Hawthorne Court. "This one," she said. "I want the room with the tree." That was all it took. After the divorce, I had spent nearly a year moving between short-term rentals and furnished apartments that never felt like mine. I wanted one place where Chloe could leave a book on the nightstand and find it there the following weekend. Hawthorne Ridge looked safe, orderly, and almost too perfect. Every lawn was clipped to the same height. Every mailbox had the same black finish. Sprinklers clicked on in neat rows at 6 in the evening. I worked in commercial property management, which meant I noticed things most buyers ignored: easements, parcel numbers, voting rights, maintenance obligations. I read every page before I signed, including the Homeowners Association bylaws. Vanessa later claimed I had never understood. She arrived before the moving truck left. Cream sweater, blonde bob, white Range Rover shining at the curb. She carried a lemon pie in one hand and a binder nearly 2 inches thick in the other. "Welcome to Hawthorne Ridge," she said, smiling like she had approved my existence. "I am Vanessa Whitmore, board president. We take community standards very seriously here." The pie smelled sweet. The binder smelled like new ink and plastic sleeves. I thanked her and set both on the kitchen counter. She walked through the first floor without being invited, pausing at the garage door, the front windows, and the small workbench I had placed against the wall. "No commercial activity from the home," she said. "No visible tools. No vehicles with company markings overnight." I told her the truck outside belonged to the movers. Her smile tightened. "Of course. I am only helping. My father used to say, 'Never argue with a signature. Find the document behind it.' He had taught me that when I was 16 and helping him sort property records at the county office. So that night, After Chloe fell asleep on a mattress under the red maple window, I opened Vanessa's binder and compared it with the recorded declaration I had downloaded from the county. 3 rules in her welcome packet did not exist in the official version. I marked them with yellow tabs, closed the binder, and said nothing. At the time, I thought Vanessa was merely overbearing. I did not yet understand that every false rule was a test, and every person who obeyed without checking made her bolder. Vanessa did not become powerful all at once. She built it one citation, one whispered warning, and one frightened neighbor at a time. The first notice appeared on my front door 3 weeks after I moved in. Heavy white paper, red border, $50 penalty for a commercial vehicle parked overnight. The vehicle was my personal pickup truck, dark blue, no company logo, no equipment visible. I photographed it, checked the recorded rules, and sent a polite response with the correct section attached. The fine disappeared without an apology. 2 weeks later, another envelope arrived because my garage door had remained open for 27 minutes while Chloe and I assembled a bookshelf. Then came a warning about the small workbench inside the garage, followed by a landscaping violation because one corner of my lawn measured 3 1/4 inches after 3 days of rain. Vanessa carried a metal ruler in her purse. I saw her use it on a Saturday morning while the sprinklers hissed across the sidewalk and wet grass darkened the toes of her cream-colored shoes. She measured, wrote something on a clipboard, and smiled when she noticed me watching. "Consistency protects property values," she said. Her voice sounded pleasant, but her fingers tightened around the pen. Chloe received her first warning when she drew a row of yellow stars in sidewalk chalk near our driveway. Vanessa called it unauthorized exterior decoration. I washed the stars away before sunset, watching yellow water run toward the gutter, while Chloe stood behind the screen door with her arms folded. That was when the house began to feel less like a home and more like a place under inspection. Across the street lived Harold and June Parker. Harold was 74, retired from the Postal Service, and moved slowly because of an old knee injury. June grew roses along their porch and baked cinnamon bread every December. Their yard was not perfect, but it was cared for. Vanessa started citing them for weeds, faded paint, and a mailbox post that leaned less than 1 inch. The penalties multiplied. $50 became $300. $300 became more than $4,000 after late fees and collection charges. One evening, Harold showed me a certified letter with trembling hands. The association was threatening to place a lien on the home they had owned for 28 years. The paper smelled like toner and rain because he had carried it across the street without an umbrella. I reviewed the charges at my kitchen table. Several cited rules did not exist. 2 inspection dates showed Vanessa had supposedly visited while she was attending a real estate conference in Arizona. When I raised the issue at the next community meeting, Vanessa sat beneath the association seal with a polished wooden gavel resting beside her water glass. She did not answer the dates. She looked around the room and asked whether anyone wanted falling standards to attract irresponsible buyers. Nobody spoke. Harold stared at the floor. June twisted a tissue between her fingers. Vanessa leaned back, satisfied by the silence. That was the moment I understood her system. The violations were not random. She targeted owners who were tired, isolated, or unable to fight. She made their homes feel like burdens. Then, when they finally sold, the same investment companies appeared with fast cash offers far below market value. I started writing down every company name, every closing date, and every signature connected to Vanessa Whitmore. By the 5th year, I had enough names, dates, and closing records to see the pattern clearly. But Vanessa still believed I was just another homeowner who would eventually get tired and leave. She was right about one thing. I had decided to leave. Chloe was 17 by then, applying to colleges and spending less time in the room with the red maple outside her window. The house had done what I needed it to do. It had given us stability when everything else felt temporary. I called a real estate agent in early March, signed the listing agreement at my kitchen table, and placed a small lockbox on the front door. Vanessa noticed it before noon. Her white Range Rover rolled past twice, slow enough that I could hear the tires brushing the curb. The next morning, a certified envelope arrived. The paper inside was thick, bright, and warm from the printer. It listed an exit assessment of $21,480, payable before the association would approve any transfer of ownership. I read the notice twice. There was no exit assessment in the declaration, no transfer fee anywhere near that amount, and no board vote authorizing it. Vanessa had simply created a number large enough to frighten a buyer and placed the association seal above it. My agent called that afternoon. The title company had received a warning from Hawthorne Ridge, claiming unresolved community obligations could affect the sale. The buyer paused the contract. I drove to the association office with the notice folded inside my leather briefcase. The lobby smelled like vanilla candles and burnt coffee. Vanessa sat behind the reception desk, wearing a pale blue blazer, her polished nails resting on a stack of violation forms. "You cannot block a lawful sale with a fee that does not exist," I said. She tilted her head and gave me the same patient smile she used at meetings. "The board has broad authority to protect the community from financial loss. Show me the recorded amendment." Her smile held, but the muscles beside her mouth tightened. "Not every policy requires your personal approval, Ethan." I placed a copy of the declaration on the desk and opened it to the transfer section. "This one does." She did not look down. Instead, she leaned back and told me that people who could not meet community standards often blamed the rules when it was time to leave. 2 days later, she repeated that idea in public. Chloe and I were carrying boxes to my pickup when Vanessa stopped beside the driveway with 2 board members and a neighbor I barely knew. "Your father is running because he cannot afford to live here," she told Chloe, loud enough for 3 nearby porches to hear. Chloe froze with a box of college brochures in her arms. The cardboard bent under her fingers. I felt something inside me turn cold and precise. I set my box on the truck bed and looked at Vanessa. "How many votes do you think you control?" I asked. She laughed, glanced at the board members beside her, and adjusted the gold pin on her lapel. "Enough," she said. That night, after Chloe went upstairs, I opened my notes, circled the names of 13 properties, and made the first call that Vanessa would never see coming. The first call went to Claire Bennett, a real estate attorney I had worked with on 3 commercial acquisitions. Claire had a voice that could make a closing table go silent without ever rising above a calm speaking tone. I told her I needed to purchase a package of residential properties without my name appearing in the early negotiations. There was a pause on the line, followed by the soft click of her keyboard. "How many properties?" she asked. 13, I said. The houses belonged to an investment group called Meridian Residential Partners, the same company that had purchased 6 homes after Vanessa buried their owners under fines and collection notices. Meridian had borrowed too much, renovated too little, and was now unloading everything before its lenders stepped in. The opportunity had been sitting inside county records for months, hidden beneath bland corporate names and routine transfer documents. I formed Northline Property Holdings through Claire's office and used a third-party acquisitions manager to make the offer. Vanessa knew my face, my truck, and my signature. She did not know Northline. For the next 90 days, I lived 2 separate lives. During daylight, I packed dishes, repaired nail holes, and watched prospective buyers walk through my house under the red maple. At night, I sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee and spreadsheets, tracing ownership shares, voting rights, outstanding liens, and every contract connected to Hawthorne Ridge. The only sounds were the refrigerator humming and Chloe's footsteps moving across the floor upstairs. Meridian accepted our offer on the condition that we take all 13 properties together. No substitutions. No delay. That was exactly what I wanted. Each house carried 1 vote under the recorded declaration. 13 houses meant 13 votes on a street with 17 voting properties. Vanessa had spent years treating those homes like pieces on her private game board. She never imagined one buyer could gather them into a single hand. The deeper review uncovered something even more valuable than the votes. As the incoming owner, Northline received access to association account statements, maintenance records, and notices tied to each property. Claire sent the files in a secure folder just after midnight on a Thursday. I opened the first statement and smelled rain drifting through the cracked kitchen window. Payments labeled landscape restoration appeared every month, but several properties receiving the service had no landscaping work at all. The vendor, Whitmore Community Solutions, shared a mailing address with Vanessa's younger brother, Dean. Another set of charges listed legal review fees, yet the law office named on the invoices had closed 3 years earlier. Then I found the Parker's lien authorization. Harold's signature looked neat, firm, and completely wrong. I had seen his real signature on the statement he gave me. His hand shook. This one did not. I printed both pages and placed them side by side inside my leather briefcase. At 9:40 the next morning, Claire called. "The county recorded every deed," she said. "Northline officially owns the block." I looked through the window at Vanessa's Range Rover gliding past my house again. She slowed near the moving boxes stacked inside my garage, then drove on. I reached into the envelope Claire had delivered and lifted a small brass key. It opened the association records room, a right transferred to the majority owner under a forgotten provision Vanessa had never bothered to remove. For the first time in 6 years, I smiled when I saw her car. The morning of the move arrived cold and clear, with a pale strip of sunlight catching the red leaves outside Chloe's old bedroom. By 7, the movers had carried out the sofa, the dining table, and most of the boxes marked for storage. The truck idled at the curb, sending a low diesel rumble through the quiet street. I was wrapping the brass house numbers in brown paper when Vanessa's white Range Rover turned into Hawthorne Court. She slowed in front of my driveway, stared at the open garage, then parked sideways across the truck's path. The engine shut off. Her door opened. The sharp scent of her perfume reached me before she did. "Stop loading," she called. "Nothing else leaves this property." I set the house numbers inside a box and wiped packing dust from my hands. Vanessa held a folder against her chest, the association seal printed across the front. 2 board members stood near the sidewalk behind her, both looking uncomfortable. "The exit assessment remains unpaid," she said. "Until the balance is satisfied, the association has an interest in fixtures, exterior improvements, and any property connected to the residence. That is not what the declaration says. I am not debating this with you." She raised her phone. "I already contacted the police." The first patrol car arrived less than 4 minutes later, then a second. Red and blue light moved across the beige siding and flashed against the moving truck's chrome mirrors. Officer Daniels stepped out, adjusted the radio on his shoulder, and asked everyone to stay calm. Vanessa immediately pointed at me. "He is taking association property and attempting to leave before we can enforce a lawful debt." Officer Daniels looked toward the boxes. "What property are you referring to?" Vanessa listed the brass house numbers, the mailbox, the video doorbell, and 2 small landscape lights I had purchased and installed myself. She spoke faster with every sentence. Her polished folder trembled slightly against her blazer. I opened my leather briefcase but did not remove the deeds. Not yet. Instead, I handed Officer Daniels the purchase receipts, the installation records, and a copy of the recorded declaration. He read in silence while Vanessa continued talking. "The documents do not matter," she said. "The board has emergency authority to protect the community." Officer Daniels glanced toward the camera mounted on his uniform. "Did the board vote on this particular assessment?" Vanessa hesitated for half a second, then pride made the decision for her. "I created the assessment because the sale needed to be stopped." The street seemed to tighten around those words. Even the movers stopped carrying boxes. Officer Daniels asked her to explain. She lifted her chin. "I froze the transfer through the title company. I can create any assessment necessary to prevent an irresponsible owner from abandoning his obligations." One of the board members quietly stepped away from her. Vanessa noticed and raised her voice. "I control the voting majority. My decisions stand." I heard the faint hiss of sprinklers starting 3 houses down. Water ticked against a wooden fence. I reached into my jacket and touched the brass key in my pocket. Then I looked at the body camera, the witnesses, and the woman who had just described her entire scheme in plain English. "Officer," I said, "before she says anything else, there is someone you should meet." A dark sedan turned onto Hawthorne Court and stopped behind the patrol cars. Claire Bennett stepped out carrying a county records envelope. Claire walked toward us without hurrying, the county envelope tucked beneath one arm and a slim black binder in her hand. Vanessa watched her approach with the expression of someone trying to decide whether a stranger mattered. "This is a private association issue," she said. Claire stopped beside the hood of the Range Rover and looked at Officer Daniels. "Claire Bennett, counsel for Northline Property Holdings. I am here to provide recorded ownership documents and notice of a change in voting control." Vanessa gave a short laugh. "Northline does not control anything here." I placed my leather briefcase on the hood of her vehicle and opened the brass latches. The sound was small, almost delicate, but every person on the street heard it. I removed the first deed and laid it flat beneath Claire's hand. County seal, recording number, property address, then the second, then the third. The pages formed a clean row across the white paint. Vanessa's smile faded by the 4th. By the 7th, her fingers had tightened around the association folder. By the 10th, she had stopped speaking. Claire placed the final 3 deeds beside the others. "Northline Property Holdings now owns 13 voting properties on Hawthorne Court," she said. "There are 17 voting properties in total." Officer Daniels looked from the papers to me. "And your connection to Northline?" I reached into the briefcase and removed the formation documents. "I am the sole managing member." The wind lifted one corner of the top page. Claire pressed it down with 2 fingers. Vanessa stepped closer, scanning the addresses. I could see recognition moving across her face one house at a time. The Parker home, the gray colonial, near the entrance, the 2 rentals beside the clubhouse. Every property she had counted as part of her support, now belonged to the company she had never bothered to investigate. "Rental owners do not have the same authority as residents," she said, but her voice had lost its polished edge. Claire opened the black binder. "The recorded declaration grants 1 vote per lot, regardless of occupancy. Northline holds 13 votes. Vanessa shook her head. "The board can suspend voting rights for unpaid assessments. All balances were paid at closing," Claire said, "including the disputed charges under written protest." One of the movers lowered a box onto the truck ramp and stood still, listening. Across the street, Harold Parker had stepped onto his porch. June stood beside him with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Vanessa looked toward them, then back at me. "You cannot just walk in and take control of an association." I removed the brass key from my pocket. Sunlight flashed along its worn edge. "This was transferred with the majority ownership package," I said. "It opens the records room." For the first time that morning, Vanessa looked frightened rather than angry. She knew what was inside that room: old invoices, meeting minutes, signature cards, contracts she had assumed nobody would ever compare. I placed the key beside the deeds. "I was not asking for permission to leave," I said. "I was giving you notice that ownership had changed." Claire handed Officer Daniels a certified copy of the voting ledger and a formal demand for an emergency membership meeting. He read the first page, then looked toward Vanessa's blocked vehicle. "You need to move the Range Rover now," he said. Vanessa did not answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the 13 deeds, spread across the hood, each one stamped, recorded, and impossible to argue away. The emergency meeting began at 6 that evening inside the Hawthorne Ridge Clubhouse, where the air smelled like carpet cleaner, old coffee, and the cinnamon candles Vanessa used to make the room feel welcoming. Every folding chair was occupied. Harold and June Parker sat in the front row. Officer Daniels stood near the back with another investigator, both quietly observing. Vanessa took her usual seat beneath the association seal and placed the wooden gavel beside her water glass, as though the morning had never happened. "This meeting is unauthorized," she announced. "Northline Property Holdings has no standing to interfere with board operations." Claire opened the black binder and placed the certified voting ledger on the table. I stood beside her with the brass key in my palm. 13 valid votes are present," Claire said. "That exceeds the number required to call a special membership meeting and remove directors." Vanessa reached for the gavel. I set the key on the table before she could touch it. The metal clicked against the polished wood. "Before we vote," I said, "the members deserve to see what was kept behind the locked door." Claire connected a small document camera to the clubhouse screen. The first invoice appeared in bright white light: $12,000 for landscaping restoration at 3 Northline properties. The photographs taken on the invoice date showed untouched yards and no work crews. The next page showed monthly payments to Whitmore Community Solutions, a company registered to Vanessa's brother at his home address. Murmurs moved through the room like wind through dry leaves. Then came the legal review fees paid to an office that had closed 3 years earlier. Vanessa folded her arms. "Administrative errors do not prove misconduct." Claire displayed Harold Parker's lien authorization beside his real signature. One line was smooth and confident. The other shook slightly at every curve. Harold stared at the screen, his face pale beneath the fluorescent lights. "I never signed that," he said. June placed her hand over his. Vanessa looked toward the exit. Officer Daniels stepped away from the wall and asked her to remain until the records review was complete. Claire played the audio captured by his body camera that morning. Vanessa's own voice filled the clubhouse, clear and unmistakable. She admitted creating the exit assessment. She admitted freezing my sale. She claimed she could invent any charge necessary to control the community. Nobody spoke when the recording ended. The silence felt heavier than shouting. Claire called the vote. 13 Northline ballots removed Vanessa and the remaining directors. 13 approved an independent audit. 13 ordered every disputed lien and penalty suspended immediately. Vanessa watched each page receive a signature, but she no longer had the gavel, the key, or the votes. An investigator approached the records room carrying evidence bags and a court-authorized search order. The same officers Vanessa had summoned to stop my moving truck now began cataloging the files she had kept locked away. She stood beneath the association seal as her authority disappeared one document at a time. I slid the false exit assessment across the table toward her. "You were right that signatures matter," I said. "You just counted on nobody checking yours." 3 months later, Hawthorne Court sounded different. The sprinklers still clicked on at 6 in the evening, lawn mowers still hummed on Saturday mornings, and delivery trucks still paused beneath the red maple at the end of the block, but the fear was gone. The independent audit found more than $180,000 in unsupported payments, fabricated legal charges, and penalties that had never been approved by a valid board vote. Vanessa was ordered to repay association funds, surrender her real estate license pending a state review, and appear in county court on charges related to false records and financial misconduct. Her brother's company lost every contract with Hawthorne Ridge. The investigator also confirmed that several homeowners had been pressured to sell after receiving manufactured violations, including Harold and June Parker. Their lien was canceled first. I was standing in their kitchen when Claire handed Harold the recorded release. The room smelled like cinnamon bread and fresh coffee. He read the page twice, tracing the county stamp with one finger as though it might disappear. June covered her mouth and looked toward the window. For 28 years, that house had been theirs. Vanessa had reduced it to a number on a collection sheet. One signature gave it back its name. Northline kept the 13 properties long enough to repair what had been damaged. We refunded invalid penalties, reopened old hearing requests, and offered long-term tenants a path to purchase at fair prices. The new bylaws required public financial reports, independent annual audits, and a limit of 2 terms for every board president. No single owner, including Northline, could control policy without resident approval. I had gathered the votes to remove a dictator. I did not intend to become another one. Vanessa remained in her home. Some neighbors expected me to force her out, but that would have made the lesson smaller than the crime. Justice was not taking her house because she had tried to control mine. Justice was making her live under the same transparent rules she had denied everyone else. She no longer had the association seal behind her, the gavel beside her hand, or frightened board members repeating her decisions. She was simply another homeowner with one vote. On the final afternoon before Northline transferred management to the new resident board, Chloe came back with me to collect a box I had left in the garage. The air smelled like dry leaves and cold pavement. She stood beneath the red maple outside her old bedroom, now taller than the lowest branches, and watched 2 workers remove the faded Hawthorne Ridge sign from the clubhouse wall. The screws came loose with a soft metallic squeak. Behind the sign, the paint was darker, preserving the outline of authority that was no longer there. I carried the leather briefcase to the truck and found the brass key in its side pocket. It had opened the records room, but it had never been the real source of power. The deeds were not either. The power came from reading what others ignored, documenting what others feared, and waiting until a lie had nowhere left to hide. Chloe looked at the empty space on the clubhouse wall and smiled. Vanessa had once said people came and went while the association remained. She had been wrong. People remained. Communities remained. False power was what disappeared. I moved away from Hawthorne Court that morning with 1 truck and a nearly empty house. By sunset, Vanessa was living on a block owned by the man she had tried to stop. But ownership was only the twist. The real victory was that nobody there would ever need my permission, or hers, to feel at home again.